welcome to Movie Vault 666. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be looking at the film Lethal Ninja. And what a title that is, right? I mean, there must be hundreds of films out there with the word ninja in the title. And out of all of them, I'd be very surprised if more than a handful were any good. And to combine it with the word lethal as if this is somehow unusual for ninjas, well, let's just say that the title doesn't inspire me with much confidence. However, what's in a name? Perhaps this could be the film to redeem ninja in the titles of movies all over the place. I guess the only way to find out is to prepare ourselves as we watch Lethal Ninja. Oh no, sorry. No, okay. What I said before about this redeeming ninja films, no. Sorry, no, this isn't it. My mistake. This basically sums up all the negativity that the title Lethal Ninja generates. Getting stared at by this cheery motherfucker, Nostradamus apparently, who didn't do anything to deserve to be dragged into this mess, is the exact same dreary text scroll music we've been sick of complaining about drones on. I mean, I think my eyes actually glazed over when trying to read that text scroll. It might actually be impossible to stare at something that bland. Fortunately, all of this filler ends when we meet a totally convincing scientist holding a beaker full of red liquid.
It's not changing color at all.
Maybe that's because you're not giving it enough time, or not adding enough water.
The samples won't be long, Professor.
No, they'll be short and round like the others.
Can't possibly have lost them again.
Oh my god, that's like an alien trying to mimic human speech. Don't trust him!
Can't possibly have lost them again. How's the fellas going with those new samples?
You'll have them in 10 minutes.
The acid level is rising. People could die.
There's no way this could have happened naturally.
Sorry, but does anyone feel like filling me in on what's going on here? It's like the script got shredded like the passports in Argo and they just carried on with the scraps that were left. Fortunately, all of this nonsense is interrupted when a helicopter arrives. Something which a younger scientist has absolutely no emotions about, apparently. However, the helicopter turns out to be carrying an evil hybrid of John Hammond and Malcolm McDowell. Whose legion of ninjas begin murdering their way through the camp with a combination of awkward neck snaps and messy sword strokes. Awesome! They butcher absolutely everyone they come into contact with except for the sexy young scientist who has no emotions whatsoever about being kidnapped. They even destroy the entire campsite with rocket launchers in order to leave no trace, besides the giant scorch mark craters where a campsite used to be. Meanwhile, back in America, our real main character is nonchalantly leading a painting class. However, he's having trouble with one of his students.
You see how easy it is? Sarah, you're not breathing. Now breathe in and out.
Okay, if you have to remind your students of the importance of breathing, then I think a painting class might be a little bit beyond them. Okay, I guess that he was supposed to be telling her to breathe deeply, but the way he was saying it, it was as if she wasn't breathing at all. Oh, and you there. Try and beat your heart rhythmically. Way to diffuse oxygen into your lungs. Good going. However, the class is interrupted when a man appears to speak to Joe.
I'll be back. You've come to join the class, Mac. There's a waiting list. A long waiting list.
Long waiting list? Try not to die by forgetting to breathe in and out. There, I just saved you the entire class. Anyway, this is apparently a man named Mac, and he reveals that our main character, Joe, is married to the scientist woman from the previous scene called Dominique. However, because this is an action movie, the government can't help, and Joe is going to have to take the matter into his own hands. To this end, he pointlessly sneaks into an extremely amateurish kickboxing class being taken by his old friend Pete, who, despite being initially apprehensive, almost immediately agrees to go with Joe because we don't have any time to waste on character motivation. Following a scene in which the characters admit to carrying crossbows into whatever vague country this is supposed to be, only for nothing of consequence to happen, we see the villain disembark from his helicopter. Well, as you can see, this is where we grow several of your 51 spices for your chicken, Colonel. Actually, instead he's arriving to taunt Dominique in his mansion.
Do you like butterflies?
What?
When I first came to Africa, I dreamed of meeting lions, of hunting elephants, of pitting myself against all the great trophies. Do you know what is the most effective killer in the wires?
It turns out it's man.
Actually, it turns out that the creature is a ladybird. Something which will be totally relevant later on. Okay, no, sorry. I can't do it. It's just padding. It turns out that the whole scene was so the bad guy could say that he needed her help, which anyone could figure out when he considered that he didn't kill her like the rest. Meanwhile, Joe and Pete are checked into their room by a Mr. Osman in a way that is by no means suspicious at all. Now, Mac did give Joe the contact details for an agent who could help out. However, when Joe rings the number, the lobby man reports it to an unknown person before allowing Joe to talk to the agent, at which point he sets up a meeting. However, before we get to that, we get a scene where Mr. Osman explains that he is working for the villain, and that Dominique and her gang of now deceased colleagues are being framed for dumping acid in the waters near her old camp. Then Joe and Pete stop by a show which is exactly the level of quality you'd expect from a film called Lethal Ninja.
Tell me, have you ever loved someone all the way?
Well, it's a different technique, whispering passionlessly into the mic, but it seems to have the crowd going, so what do I know? To be fair, this does mean a whole minute with no excruciating attempts at acting, so I think I'm actually down with this. Now, with Joe and Pete trying to meet their contact in such a public location, they know they need to stay subtle and keep their wits about them, which is why they immediately get into a brawl with two local toughs, making themselves utterly unlikable at the same time by grabbing the opponent's balls, acting more hostile than the frigging villain.
Check this mud out.
Gentlemen! My apologies, gentlemen, from the management. These chaps seem to have misbehaved rather badly. I may buy you a drink, perhaps?
Perhaps not. I'll tell you what, though. You keep these animals, these chaps, off of our backs, okay? Or somebody's really gonna get hurt.
Even topping it off with the same lame comedy.
Yes, of course. Please come again.
They always seem to say that, huh?
None of them mean it, man.
Let's get out of here.
I want a refund. I didn't catch all of your act.
The main characters bump into their contact, and after a couple of scenes that don't advance the plot even a little, they bump into him again. And you know what? Something tells me that isn't his real voice.
Any friend of Max is a friend of mine.
So while the main characters are trying to track down Joe's wife, Mr. Osman is busy putting the moves on her.
Can I count on your help?
You're very beautiful.
And I'm very married.
Why? I know that. It's just two of us here.
This may come as a surprise to you, but I'm an old-fashioned girl.
Not in those clothes, it won't. Meanwhile, at an old amusement park,
Friend of yours?
It's only me.
So what's the deal with the horsemen of the apocalypse?
More like apocalypse now.
Enough of your wisecracking.
more like, never try to make a joke again, you stupid piece of shit movie. Anyway, despite this, the agent somehow doesn't lamp the two of them for that aborted attempt at humour, and instead gives them a file, after which he seems to be having some car trouble.
Joe, you know what? Something's fucking wrong now. It's gone too far. We're talking killers here, man.
Oh, shit.
You know what? After this carousel stunt, man, I'm beginning to hate this place. I hate it.
That's tough. It's really tough.
Gee, I sure hope that he doesn't... Yeah, okay. Yeah, saw that coming. After his death, it appears that the villains planted a bomb on the car the main characters were about to get into as well. The file eventually leads Joe and Pete back to the camp that Colonel Sanders blew up at the beginning of the film, and this is apparently the cue for what could generously be called character development. Joe recounts how Dominique changed him to be a more kind-hearted man and turn his back on violence, whilst Pete regales the audience with how he met someone that he loved, only to have his affection spurned when she left him for a pilot.
She ran off with an airline pilot.
A pilot? Yeah, I'm sorry, man. These are pilots, bodybuilders. So what happened? What did you do?
Switched airlines.
Let's get out of here.
Whoever told the writer that he could do witty repartee really needs to suffer for this movie. With the characters having picked up on the trail of Dominique, they head towards the nearest action set piece for use later in the movie, and immediately trip a magical alarm alerting the villain. Also, because this film was determined to hit every trope in the action genre, the villain orders Joe and Pete brought to him, presumably so he can monologue at length about his plans. Pete immediately handles a surprisingly ineffectual ninja before blowing up half the structure and knocking a stuntman flying. Our heroes then successfully take out a few ninjas before retreating to the jeep, but not before taking the opportunity to totally rip off a vastly superior film. Next, because the film may have been worried it wasn't generic enough, Cue unexciting car chase. Oh, and we get wisecracks from the two main characters. Yippee.
Why don't you hit the brakes?
You want brakes? I'll give you brakes.
Eventually they managed to shake their pursuers by causing them to crash in violent ways that would almost certainly kill the occupants if you couldn't blatantly see that the cars were empty.
Now
Once
things are
back at the
looking up.
hotel, they receive a message informing them that they are in danger, and Joe goes to investigate a fort where he is easily able to murder the first ninja he comes across. But after disguising himself, accidentally walks into the ninja's yoga session, and it's really awkward. Actually, it turns out to be some kind of arena where all the ninjas wear spiky roller skates for some reason. Fortunately, eventually, Joe remembers that he has a sword, and uses it to cut the power cables. However, the villains reset the fuses, and that fixes the situation, because apparently the fix for cut power cables is just turning them off and on again. However, when the lights come back on, Joe is gone, and we cut to some kind of freaky water park. However, the childish water park turns out to be a pump station that Peter discovered almost immediately. However, because this is Lethal Ninja, and tension is something that was lost due to budget cuts, Pete easily escapes, and Joe shows up in his ninja costume to help him escape. So actually the main characters are captured seconds later when the villain shows up with a group of machine gun armed ninjas, who unnecessarily fire a whole bunch of ammunition into the sand. But it's all a bit underwhelming, really.
It's ninjas with machine guns?
You two have given my men a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah? Where's my wife, you son of a bitch?
She's in good health so far.
I'll tell you what. You give it back to me, and I'll stop trying to prove that your men here are a bunch of pricks.
I'll tell you what. Let's see how good you are. Chang. That's my best.
And if I win?
I am a man of honor. She will be released to you.
So following a dull fight sequence where Joe is never at any risk, played out in near silence other than a totally miscued soundtrack and plenty of obnoxious whooshing sounds, Joe wins easily. However, Mr. Osmond shows up and tells Joe that he is the one who has Dominique and won't be releasing her, making the whole scene somehow more redundant than the ones preceding it. Plus, here's his villainous line.
Take them to the seesaw.
More like apocalypse seesaw. Ha ha. Man, doing fairground-related banter is actually a lot harder than I thought.
More like Apocalypse Now.
So having captured Joe and Pete, he talks to that crappy lounge singer from earlier and tells her his whole plan. And as if the reveal that Mr. Osmond was the main villain the whole time wasn't a weak enough twist, we now have to listen to another exposition dump.
So you're the one behind the water scheme?
Anyway, it quickly becomes apparent that she intends to help Joe and Pete, who are tied up in this contraption. When she does go to help them, though, her approach could be a little subtler.
One of those men have a notebook. I have to find it.
But I first need permission, ma'am.
But of course, I have permission. Follow me. I'm here to help.
Hey, bitch, I'm standing right next to you. I heard everything you said. Anyway, despite this moment of stupidity, she gets Joe and Pete free. Now all they have to do is defeat a whole bunch of ninjas with nothing but their bare hands. Unfortunately, we've already seen them do just that, so there's no real stakes. I mean, maybe they could introduce the villain's strongest henchman, except no! They already blew that earlier and Joe defeated them with ease. So instead, they easily defeat generic henchmen, attach what looks suspiciously like a belt buckle and a coffee cup to random bits of machinery, before confronting an aging villain who was distracted by Dominique's underwear. Oh, and a hovering boom mic. In a surprise twist, Joe manages to defeat Colonel Sanders and one of his henchmen without any real challenge and rescues Dominique. They then blow up the villain's base, but not before being personally thanked by the president of whatever country this is supposed to be, leaving them with only one thing to do. Chase down the final bad guy and defeat him without any real challenge. Mr. Osmond confronts him at the action set piece from earlier, even though he has a helicopter and can just fly away. Joe then easily defeats a few more bad guys, and having already managed to trick one henchman from earlier into shooting Colonel Sanders, now also manages to get one of Mr. Osmond's henchmen to kill him as well. Then we get aerial shots, including the shadow of the helicopter footage is being taken from, and fade out, at least safe in the knowledge that we won't have to hear any more backward forth from the main leads. Well, that was Lethal Ninja, and I have to say, it is totally inept on every level. Even ignoring technical gaffes that are part and parcel of cheaper films, it's just a giant mess. The film has no tension, no memorable or likeable characters, no interesting or unique action scenes, nothing. It's hard to imagine what you could use as a selling point for this film. There's some mild comedy value in Lethal Ninja's low-budget errors, but it really lacks the standout moments that make a film worth watching for good or for bad. I normally like to give at least one positive when reviewing these films, no matter how minor the positive for each film. But with today's film and the obnoxious banter between the main characters, all I can really say is that at least it ended. Anyway, that was Lethal Ninja, and this has been Movie Vault 666. I'm Chris, and I'll see you next time